And we begin this hour with your wallet and the latest cost of living numbers. Canada's inflation rate just hit its slowest pace in more than 3 years, slipping to 1.7% in April. Now, prices are still climbing, but the pace has eased. You won't be surprised to hear some of the biggest price hikes are at the grocery store. Senior business reporter Nisha Patel is here with more on what this means for your spending. Hi, Nisha.
Hey, and yeah, we did see much cooler inflation in April, and a big part of that was because of the drop in gas prices. 18% lower in April compared to the same time a year ago, and that was driven by the end of the consumer carbon tax, as well as falling oil prices. But while energy costs have dropped, other expenses have spiked, and there was a big increase month over month in the cost of travel tours. And just when it seemed like food inflation was under control, those prices are ticking up again at grocery stores. Have a listen.
These are products that are more currency sensitive. So a weaker Canadian dollar in April, could have been part of that. You also did have some tariffs imposed on fresh fruits and vegetables from the United States. So some of that could be a tariff impact.
So last month, we did see fresh vegetables cost nearly 4% more. Tea and coffee rose about 13%. And Ian, the price of fresh and frozen beef jumped about 16%.
Yeah, so it's always interesting with these inflation numbers because you get kind of the average number for everything, but specific things, and as you point out, some really key foodstuffs are actually going up still quite a bit in price. So kind of give us the overall way that this is having an impact on businesses and especially consumers.
Yeah, consumers feel it every day at the grocery store. That's the thing we spend most of our money on. Consumers continue to try and find deals. They're cutting items out. Food inflation also really hits low-income families harder because they spend a bigger portion of their budgets on food. And it's not clear how long that price pressure will persist as we continue to see the fallout of the trade war with the U.S. Restaurant meals are also costing more as businesses can't swallow these higher prices. I talked to one restaurant owner today who's having to switch his menu up, kind of lose some of his items and offer promotions to try and get customers into the store. Have a listen.
Our cost of goods in general, not just for beef, but for paper products, for oils and everything, they continue to rise. It's sitting at well over 30% more for almost all of our goods than it was in 2020. So beef especially has gone up far more than that, 30%. So we've had to transfer that cost over to the consumer. We just can't afford, or we take it off the menu because we can't afford to sell it at a reasonable rate.
And so the Bank of Canada now is watching all of these numbers closely. Excluding energy, inflation actually came in at 2.9%. That's beyond the central bank's target and higher than it would like, and would call for higher interest rates. At the same time, the trade war with the U.S. is putting a real strain on the economy, and that would call for lower interest rates. So, Ian, it all makes the Bank of Canada's next decision a little more difficult and one we'll really have to watch closely.
And again, underscoring this is the worst time, though there's not a best time for a trade war. Nisha, thank you very much.
You bet.
So you might be wondering, is there anything you can do the next time you go to the supermarket? Well, our next guest is a food economics professor at the University of Guelph, Mike von Massow. Mike, the inflation rate has gone up, but as we heard in Nisha's interview, when it comes to food, it's a different story. So give us some tips of what Canadians can do to get a little bit more bang for their buck at the supermarket.
Well, I think there's a couple of things we can look at. We tend to be creatures of habit as Canadians. So if broccoli was in our basket last week, it's going to be in our basket this week. We're coming into a season where we expect many fresh fruits and vegetables to get cheaper because we'll be producing them in Canada. No American dollars and not transporting it as far. So I ate asparagus over the weekend. It's in season. So eating those seasonal vegetables makes a lot of sense at this time of year. In the winter, when we get into next winter, then eating Canadian storable fruits and vegetables. Carrots are one thing we switched to when we tried to stop buying American, and in fact, it got cheaper. So be flexible, take advantage of what's on special, do some of the price matching that grocery stores offer. The trade-off between lower costs is investing a bit more time. So spending the time to do your research can save you a lot of money.
And you study this sort of stuff, right? So this isn't just theoretical. You know that some of these things actually work.
Well, for sure they do. Not only do we study it, I've seen it in reality in my own home. So finding products that are seasonal in the winter, that can also be frozen vegetables. We know, as an example, I love yogurt. I never eat yogurt at full price because I know that yogurt is always going to be on special. So since I am not stuck on a specific brand, I'm willing to be flexible. I'm willing to try things that are cheaper. In that circumstance, I can save a lot of money.
And there's an interesting tip that I hadn't heard until recently about kind of a ratio we should keep in mind when it comes to preparing meals.
Well, I think what many of us will say, and what they're telling us from a health perspective, is maybe have smaller portions of protein. And so thinking about more plant-based vegetables on our plate at meals can save us a ton of money, particularly as we get into the summer months.
And, you mentioned American. A lot of Canadians obviously are quite adamant that they are going to try to avoid American goods. I was going to say at any cost, but of course, for a lot of people, there is a cost at which, you just can't do that anymore if it costs too much. What about that? What about avoiding American food? Is that something you can do and still stay on a budget?
Well, it's particularly easy to do in the summer when we're getting into the production season. So you can get Canadian asparagus now. Before long, you'll be able to get Canadian lettuce and Canadian carrots and those sorts of things. So figuring out what's seasonal and being flexible, being willing to eat carrots in the winter, beets, cabbages, which are storable, being willing to eat frozen vegetables, which, I remember from my youth weren't that nice, but with new flash freezing technology, the nutrition is the same and the texture is pretty good too. So you can eat Canadian. It's just that we don't grow some of these things in Canada, particularly in the winter. So if you want to have lettuce in the winter, you're going to have to buy American or greenhouse product. So buying what's seasonal and thinking about Canadian, being flexible, is a great way to save money.
Yeah, and of course the other thing about Canadian products is that they don't face any tariffs if you buy them in Canada. One last thing, have you seen any analysis yet on the impact of rolling back the consumer carbon levy, whether that's had an impact on food prices?
I wouldn't expect it to have a significant impact on food prices. Clearly, it's going to have some from the transportation perspective. But if you looked at the estimates beforehand, that the impact on food prices were 0.2, 0.3% from the carbon tax. So if we didn't think that it was a big impact on the way up, it's not likely going to have a significant impact bringing them back down.
Yeah, really good point, Mike. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Thanks, Ian. Have a great day.
Mike von Massow is a professor of food economics at the University of Guelph.